Hi, I'm Ollie from Waikato Real Estate, and this is our property portfolio analyzer spreadsheet. I'm just going to run through a live example with you now, and hopefully it'll all make sense. Okay, so straight into it, and here we are at the portfolio summary tab. We're going to start off here by analyzing one property, but this sheet works as well for 10 properties as it does for one. So off we go. Okay, property number one is property of our own, which is at 8 O'Halpo Road in Hamilton, if anyone knows that street. So we're just going to run through this sheet, and what we'll do is we'll key in all this information in the light grey boxes. There'll be a lot of other calculations going on in the background, and then we'll analyze the results down here. So we'll kick off with property we're analyzing here on O'Halpo Road. Market value we've got for that is $650,000. The loan on that is $350,000. This was bought a few years ago. You can see the equity there is therefore $300K. I'm just going to fill out who our lender was. Next, we fill out income. So that's how much rent we're receiving. This property is bringing in $550 a week. Just to be on the conservative side, I'm going to say 1 week empty per year. In practice, though, we tend to find that we're running at about 1 or 2 weeks empty every 4 years, given most tenancies these days are averaging around 4 years. So that gives us 52 weeks times 550 minus the 1 week that's empty, gives us our annual rental income of $28,050. Okay, now we're on to our expenses. So loan rate for this loan is going to be 3%. This got fixed a little while ago before interest rates exploded. So you can see our annual loan repayment there of $10,500. That's based on an interest-only loan. Now let's fill out all the other costs we've got for this property. So we've got in Hamilton, it's district council rates. So for this property it is $2,647. No regional council rates, don't apply in Hamilton. Insurance, we're paying just over $1,000. Accounting is roughly $500 per property. Okay, now on to maintenance. So the way I like to think about maintenance costs is as a percent of the annual rental income. So it's somewhere between 0 and 5%. So for an older property, you want to assign a greater percentage of your annual rent towards maintenance. For a new build, it might be 0 or 1%, very little in the way of maintenance for a new build house you'd expect. This property has been renovated recently, so I'm just going to put in 3% there. So that spits out $850 worth of maintenance for the year. Lawns and gardens for this one are up to the tenant, so 0 for that. And we're paying the 8.25% management fee to Waikato Real Estate. Okay, next up is the letting fees. You'll notice this looks pretty small. Obviously, letting fees are 1 week's rent plus gist. They get charged by Waikato Real Estate and pretty much every other property manager out there. Having looked at our whole portfolio of over 1,000 properties, on average, new tenancies are signed up every 4 years. So that means you'll be paying a letting fee on average once every 4 years. So this is reflected in this number here. That's essentially 25% of a letting fee. So that gives us total costs of just over $18,000 and a profit before tax of close to $10,000. Now on to ratios, which you'll find at the bottom of the sheet here in the dark grey cells. Ratios are super important for analysing property or comparing one property to another. There's a lot of stuff out there debating the merits of various ratios, but in all honesty, they're all pretty useful in different ways. So the first one we've got here is gross yield. So this is your annual rental income divided by the market value of the property. This is a great one for comparing properties because you're not taking into account any loans or any of the costs for that property. So it's very quick and simple, and it's useful to take a look at. So for this property, you can see the gross yield is 4.4%. up after that is your net yield. So this is where you take your profit before tax. So that's your income, your rental income minus expenses. So that's all expenses, loan rates, everything that we filled out earlier in the grey cells. That's all getting taken into account. So I really think this is a good one because this is what you're walking away with at the end of the day. So that's what's important. Okay, next up we've got ROI, which, I mean, funnily enough, there's a few different definitions of ROI. But for here, what I'm using is your profit before tax divided by your equity. So the amount of money you've got tied up in that property, this is telling you what the return is on that money. Now we're going to flick over to the second tab of the spreadsheet, which sucks in all the data we've just entered here. Everything in the grey cells, and this auto-calculated in the white cells is going to feed through to this tab here. Okay, you can see all our information there. So what we've got at the top, we've got a lot of predictions for the future. We've got predictions for my personal predictions for capital growth, rent increase, inflation, and interest rates. So you can see across the top, we've got year 1 to year 10. And then what I've done here is in all the light grey cells, I've entered what I think is going to happen in the future. So first off, we've got capital growth, this first row here. So what I think is going to be the changes in property prices going forward each year. So this first year I've got -5%, which is actually probably a little bit low. I'm going to change that to -8. And then I've got a couple of years of nothing happening, and then a return to small gains in the future. You might think I'm a bit crazy thinking that we're ever going to get back to gains again, but it's been shown on average that property prices double every 10 years, and that's been happening for a few decades. Even though that is hard to believe, there's been some studies there done, which I can actually forward on to you if you'd like to read it yourselves. It's quite fascinating. And yeah, property prices have been doubling every 10 years for a few decades now. Rent increases, I've stuck 2% rent increase in each year. So for a $500 a week property, that's $10 a week increase, more or less. So that seems pretty reasonable. You could, of course, argue for higher or lower. Inflation, well, is a runaway train right now, so I'm going to put that in at 7% for the first year, and then coming a little bit lower as things come under control. The RBNZ target is for inflation between 1% and 3%. That's what they're aiming for with everything they do with the OCR. So sort of think that's probably going to be at the higher end of their range going forward. Home loan rates, I've got the 1 year rate in here at the moment. So this is what I think is going to be happening going forwards for 1 year home loan rates. The best one out there, I think, is 4.85 at the moment. So I've got that in for 1 year's time. And going forward, I think there'll be a bit of an increase, and then it'll slowly come a little bit lower as the OCR comes lower also. Okay, so then what we do here is we've dragged in all the data that we pumped into the spreadsheet earlier. So that's grabbing through actually the totals here. So whether you're analyzing one property or many properties, the total will show up on the right hand side, and then it'll feed through to our scenario analysis tab here. So what's happening here is, I'll run you through a bit of an example, that the market value that we had on the first tab, the current market value we're saying for that property on Halper Road is 650k. 1 year later, I think house prices are going down 8%. 8% lower is going to mean that property is worth 598k. And then we follow that through with all the changes we put up here, and we follow that through the years, and we finish up year 10. That property is worth $771,000. We do the same with our loan here. It's an interest-only loan, so the loan amount remains the same going forward. In 10 years' time, that's still 350k owed to the bank. The equity on the property initially decreases because we've got house prices dropping by 8%, But over time, that steadily grows, and we're back up to 421k in 10 years' time. Then we move on to probably what I think the two most important numbers to look at in this scenario is our accumulated capital gain or equity gain over the years. So you can see that in that first year when property prices drop, our capital gain takes a hit, but then recovers over time, and we end up with an increase in capital gain or an increase in equity of 121k. The second line here is our accumulated profit before tax. So where does that come from? Okay. Underneath, what we've got here is everything that we entered on the first sheet. It's the totals for all our income and all our expenses. And then what we do is we take those numbers and then we apply all the changes we've got in our scenarios up here, and that will spit out what our expected profit before tax is each year. So for example, the annual loan repayment, as we roll the years forward, we'll take into account the loan rates that we put in up the top here. Likewise, your district council rates are all being adjusted for the inflation numbers that we put in up here. Your rental income is all being adjusted for the rent increases that we've put in up here. So once we take all our profits that we figured out down here, we have this line here, which is an accumulation of those profits over time. So that shows us after 10 years, we've accumulated 61k of total profits from running that property as a rental. Okay, so what's this graph that's hidden behind my face here that's been changing while we've been mucking around with our numbers on the left? So this is a representation of the accumulated equity gain, which is the green bars, and your accumulated profit before tax of running as a rental, and that's your blue bars. So this is just quite handy really as you muck around with things over here. Maybe you play around with, what should we play around with? Maybe the downturn from here is not as bad as expected, so it's only minus 5% this first year. We can play around with those, and we're going to see this bar graph changing on the right. Okay, so it's just another way of looking at numbers. Some people are happy looking at numbers, some people like to see it in charts, so we've got a bit of both. What's really cool about this is that you can play around with what might be happening in the future. So you can sort of stress test your portfolio, see what happens if, I don't know, maybe there's a prolonged downturn in property prices. Let's hope not, but it could happen. And just see how things look for your properties over time. You can see even if there's more of a downturn than perhaps is predicted, for this example anyway, it's not the end of the world. Over a long-term view, there's still money being made, or money to be made. So it does give you a bit of security there when looking into the future. So please have a play around with the spreadsheet. I would love any feedback you can give me, and if I can help you any further, then please get in touch.